How are you guys? Welcome back to Wargaming China, the channel where I platform my understandings of the war of resistance against Japanese aggression from 1931 to 1945, and I do this for the wargamers and armchair historians, modelers, anyone who's interested in this bit of obscure history that, well, only I seem to cover. Now, today, we're going to talk about the Guns of Jiangyin. As you guys know, I'm doing a campaign right now. This is the table I'm on. I still haven't had another time. I'm still stuck on turn 4. Haven't really had time to play the game. But today, I'm going to talk about the Guns of Jiangyin, the game itself, and tell you, as usual, things that I got wrong and things that are wrong with the table. Okay, so let's start about Jiangyin. Now, Jiangyin itself is very famous. The Guns of Jiangyin are very famous in China and are celebrated. And the reason for this is that the Chinese people themselves consider the Guns of Jiangyin to be the last time that Chinese troops drove a foreigner off Chinese soil. These were the last guns to fire on foreign vessels in the Yangtze River and drive out the foreign vessels. The vessel they were firing on was a HMS Amethyst, which was stuck up the Yangtze in 1949. So the guns that were firing at the Amethyst might have been firing from Jiangyin, but they were certainly not the same guns that the Chinese were using to defend Jiangyin against the Japanese. Now, the Guns of Jiangyin are a very good example of why, if you are trying to learn, as I am, about China's war with Japan, then Western sources should never ever be trusted just off the bat. And I'll give you an example of this for the Guns of Jiangyin. Now, for the Guns of Jiangyin, most Western observers who talk about the Guns of Jiangyin talk about the 150mm and the 88s serving together. Well, that's not the case, but let's go back to those 150mm SKC German guns. Now, the defense of Jiangyin is going to have echoes, or has echoes, of the Battle of the Atlantic, because the 150mm SKC-28 guns that defended Jiangyin were also the secondary armament on famous ships like the Graf Spee, the Bismarck, the Tirpitz, the Prince Eugen. So, when the Bismarck was commissioned in 1936, first sailed, for the Kriegsmarine, she was equipped with 11-inch guns, and her secondary armament were 150mm guns, SKC-28 turrets. Now that sounds all brilliant, doesn't it? And if I looked at the resources, and I said that the West, Jiangyin, there was 88s and 150mm guns, but there were no 88mm guns at Jiangyin. Now, I know, and we know, most Chinese people who want to study this could read this quite readily, but not so much for the English language people. Okay, so at Jiangyin, there were 4 150mm SKC-28 guns. Now, what you're looking at are my 88mm SKC guns, and one which I bodged up because I thought, you only need one gun. It's one 150mm gun for Jiangyin. If I make it more generic, I can use it in other scenarios. I don't know if that was the right decision now that I'm doing a video on it, but when I started wargaming this, I had no idea I'd start a YouTube channel. So let's talk about the guns. Well, if we look at Western accounts, it will tell us that the Chinese bought 12 guns. They bought rangefinders, centralized fire control systems, and the mounts for the guns themselves. Now, although China may have bought those things or paid for those things, there's a very big difference, and there always will be, between what China pays for, what arrives in China, and what actually gets to the front. So with these guns, there are 4 at Jiangyin. At this point, I want to thank my mate Alexander Wong for sending me a nice photo of an aerial photo of the base, and from this I could deduct where the gun pits were. Now, as I said, Jiangyin is a very famous place in China. The guns are celebrated, and this part of now this is a golf course now. There is a little port up there where traders load and unload their stuff, and around the mountain itself there's a lovely forested walkway and a park. Now in the park they have 2 of the gun pits still exist, but they have but they're the later gun pits that the Soviets supplied the Soviet guns, and sorry, so it's quite a tricky subject, this. So there were 4 guns at Jiangyin. They were not mounted, although they were turreted weapons. They were not mounted in the same way as the air-fixed coastal defense fort here, but it was just something to get on the table. And I only had photos of the gun positions themselves, thanks to Alexander Wong, very, very recently. So instead of being concrete emplacements, the 150mm guns were placed in circular gun pits, brick lined with a lime wash. As far as the mounts go, it doesn't seem the mounts. Some sources say that the mounts were just supplied with the guns, and others were said that the Chinese would build the mounts themselves, and it's not that difficult to build mounts for guns. However, the guns were mounted on improvised platforms that the sailors themselves built. So when I said the sailors, I said a few videos ago, the sailors are good at their jobs, so they got the guns into position. Now, as far as the rangefinders go, the literature says that China bought the latest rangefinder, and however, they had the rangefinders. They were not equipped. The guns at Jiangyin were not equipped with the rangefinders. Also, the guns at Jiangyin were not equipped with the centralized fire control system. So all of this put together severely hampered the performance of the guns. But the Chinese sailors, the naval personnel manning those guns, did put up resistance. They did hit a couple of minesweepers, and enough close misses that they were duly respected by the Japanese. Now, all the guns had fallen silent, in some accounts, by the 3rd of December. But in other accounts, we hear that I have read that the Japanese say that there were still some guns firing at Jiangyin up until the 8th. Now, as a war game, as you can see, I've only got 3 of the guns on the table. In rapid fire, I should probably only have 1, because you build your weapons your armies at a ratio of 6-to-1 for heavy weapons and 15-to-1 for men. So having 3 guns here is more than enough to represent a scenario, the historic scenario of the Battle of Jiangyin. Now I'm going to move over. Maybe I won't actually, because let's move that a little bit closer so you can see the other gun. Maybe I should just. So this was another position I made myself. So as I said, these are quite wrong, but made that myself. This, like I said, the gun pits should be circular, brick-lined, lime-washed pits. Now, once the Japanese had captured the Jiangyin fortress, they immediately said they captured all the guns intact. And they immediately set about stripping them down and sending them back to Japan. Now, they did arrive in Japan, and they were equipped to upgrade the guns at Shimotseko Fortress. And today the gun pit still exists, as does the building for the fire control system, for the centralized fire control system. Now, the SKC-28 fired a shell weighing over 43 kilos out to a distance of 22.5 kilometers at a speed of between 850 meters a second to 875 meters a second. Now, just for a comparison, a PaK-40, 75mm German PaK-40, delivered its shot at 750 meters a second. So these are powerful. These are very powerful guns. When the Japanese eventually get them back to Japan and deploy them, they will equip them with their own rangefinders and central fire control systems. But the Japanese will never get the performance out of these that the Chinese did, because the Chinese were using German ammunition, and the German ammunition was just far superior. Now, believe it or not, the guns, the SKC-28 150mm guns, were also put on by the Germans, they were put on an artillery carriage. The carriage for, I believe it's a 270mm mortar, and issued with naval ammunition, not Wehrmacht ammunition. These are all whack your shell in, then you charge bags, you know. Not two-piece ammunition, you know, not standard German army ammunition at all. So they went with Navy ammunition, and apparently these guns for the Germans were still in operation up until the Battle of Kursk. And they were in service with the Japanese, obviously, until the end of the war. Now, how many guns did China get? It appears that 12 were ordered. 4 were in place at Jiangyin. 4 more could well have arrived in China, but some kind of, but whatever happened to them is unknown. As I said, China ordered all the kit and caboodle, all the goodies for it, bells and whistles and the lot. But at Jiangyin, she only had the guns and the sailors, so the sailors would have been adjusting the guns manually, and that would have been a hell of an effort. So, you know, putting up resistance at all with guns that aren't mounted correctly, that you don't have a rangefinder for, that lack of centralized fire control system, to get any effort at all, any results at all, shows how good an effort the Chinese Navy were putting in. So that's it for the Guns of Jiangyin, and I hope you enjoyed that. Hope you subscribe, hope you press like. See ya.